Hey guys, this video is about the IWC Cal 44, and that's a watch that basically I've done a lot of work on it. It's a very small 17.5 millimeter ladies movement. It's the first thing that I tried to work on. I have two of them. One is working. One I'm still gonna do a complete rebuild on, but I wanted to kind of, but my idea behind these videos is that all the IWC Cal 44 stuff will end up in a playlist. Not that anybody would ever play the whole thing, but basically that I want to document the whole process of working with that movement and the various steps, starting from like not knowing anything about watchmaking to eventually rebuilding it and lubricating it and having the movement working perfectly. So the complication that happened before that I want to talk a little bit about now was that I realized that the pivots were missing on the balance staff, and I had anticipated that, and I had a new pivot. I purchased a new pivot on eBay for $6 or €6 or something. So I have that, or sorry, the new balance staff with the OK pivots, since it's new. And eventually the problem with that is that you need a staking tool in order to rivet the new, to remove the old broken balance staff and rivet in the new one. And as you can see, this is freaking tiny. But basically the next problem that I got into was like, okay, I need a staking tool. Staking tools come in these kits with a whole bunch of stakes. And I was like, I really want to focus on this watch. I don't want to buy a kit that's, also has stakes for grandfather clocks and stuff like that in it, because the kits can cost $2,000. So I just did some research, and I think it's interesting. There's a few things about the staking tool that are interesting. One is that in Bergeon, there's a few different kind of types and levels of quality, but they all use a 4.7 millimeter diameter stake. So that means that these pieces that go into the tool, it's the standard is 4.7 millimeter diameter for that. And that's kind of important because I want to buy this staking tool that's 149 Swiss francs without any stakes. And then the stakes are about $4 each. So instead of buying a $800 kit with 100 stakes or whatever, I can just buy the staking tool and then buy the stakes that I need. So I think I can get away with like 8 or 9 stakes, which are, of course, because of this watch, they are just the smallest range of flat and domed 4.7 millimeter stakes. So that's kind of the plan. And then just wanted to go over, I kind of also like to review things in these videos just in case somebody's watching it for the first time. So this is what happened was I bought a Cal 44 complete for 210 Swiss francs on Ricardo, the Swiss auction website. And it was listed as working, and it did work, but at a certain angle it didn't work. So this is that watch, kind of, because this has a different movement in it. After I realized it didn't work at certain angles, I took it to a Swiss watchmaker in the Valley de Joux, which is where Patek Philippe has a facility, and Bulgari and Blancpain and a whole bunch of watchmakers, Piaget. Anyway, I went up there downtown. There was a watchmaker. I showed them this. They said I left it with them. They said it would be $600 to do a revision on it, which would include repair. I don't know if they would have charged me more for parts or something because I didn't go for it. But basically, that's kind of the story. But then what I assumed that the balance staff was, even without knowing what a balance staff was, I assumed that the problem was there's, a balance in there, and that if at certain angles it's not working, it must be because that piece is getting jammed, and therefore I correctly assumed that the pivot was missing on the balance staff without even knowing what those things were. So I bought a balance staff on eBay, and I took it actually when I went up to the watchmaker and left it with them. But when I got it back, because I didn't go for the service, I got that balance staff back, and it's here in this Brodico, and it's next to this caliper, which I was using just as a reference, visual reference to figure out the range of stakes that I need, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But in the end, I tried to repair the movement that was not working. I completely disassembled it, reassembled it. It worked again after the complete disassembly and reassembly, but it still had the problem of not working at certain angles because of the broken pivot. So that movement is now here. And then the spare movement that I bought, which I don't know if I mentioned, I paid $50 for a spare movement that was also working, and that's in the watch, and that is working. Okay, so that's kind of where we are. And then I have a case that the spare movement had a different dial and hands on it, so I put the original dial and hands on the working watch, and then I put the spare hands and dial on the movement that was originally in here that has the broken pivot, and I found a case that will almost fit for that. Now, that's the background. The reason that I want to talk about all this stuff, even though it's boring, is that if you watch a lot of watchmaking videos on YouTube, as I have, you will see people doing the same things over and over again. The details of putting a gear in place, taking a plate off, putting the plate back on, cleaning it, whatever it is. You're going to see a lot of the same things edited together very quickly because it takes a long, to condense a work into 20 minutes. People end up having to edit everything out. And in the end, you don't really see what all the issues and problems of actually doing watchmaking are. So what I'm trying to do is go ahead and show that. And so the issues that I've had have been tools. They've been like figuring out, diagnosing problems, figuring out what the solution to the problem is. And again, I'm coming at this from the point of view of somebody who has no experience, but I'm like diving in, looking for a problem to solve, looking at how to solve it. So the staking tools, the other thing about the staking tool is in order to even know that, what I did was I looked at videos, and I'll put links in there here for the videos. This is sorry, I don't remember it's my favorite, one of the best watchmakers on YouTube. I think he's just called the Watch Repair Channel. So in this video, again, there'll be a link. He shows exactly how to figure out what stake size you need and all the steps of replacing the balance staff. And it's called Fitting a New Balance Staff to a Vintage 1940s SEMA watch, whatever. Okay, so that's a very good video. That's how I got the information that I got. And then the other one that's also very good is Chronoglide, Kalle Slapp in the Netherlands. He also did a video about this. And this shows, he has this graphic, and he shows exactly how the riveting works, where things go, how to do it. Very similar. And then poising, I guess it's called, of the balance wheel. Try to make sure it's balanced. So I'll put a link to that as well. So by looking at those two videos, I figured out, I have the balance staff, I have the original balance wheel. When I take it out, I need to rivet it, I need the staking tool. So I went to Bergeon's website for the the tools, and one of the problems. Okay, so that was where I discovered that this is the one I'm interested in for 142 Swiss francs / dollars. This is the one that's an inexpensive kit because it only has 50 stakes or something, but it's already $450. So my idea was to get this $142 one. This is an even bigger kit with more stakes. Just get it without stakes and then buy the stakes separately because the stakes are $4. And then by looking at each of these in detail in the specs, I saw that they all have a 4.7 millimeter diameter. They all use the same size stakes. So there's not, so if you get one and then you get a kit later on used or something, the stakes are all going to work and be compatible in theory. Now the only other problem with this is that everything at Bergeon, not everything, but many things at Bergeon are out of stock right now. I don't know if that is a sign that everybody is getting into vintage watch repair, which it may very well be, but that's an issue. And then what else do I have here? So you can look at this, and from those videos, I figured out that I need flat punches and domed punches, and then starting at the smallest sizes, like the bottom 4 would take me from 0.3 millimeter diameter up to 0.45, and same with this one. And the reason I know I need flat and domed is from watching both of those videos. And then, okay, so then I made a list of part numbers, and then you also need a centering punch, which is if you have a staking tool, you need to center it also from the videos or from the Watch Repair Channel's video. So those are the 9 punches that I need, plus the staking tool, most of which is not in stock. And I think that's it for that. There are also some, AliExpress has some staking tool with punches, but they don't specify the size of the punches. And I'm a little bit worried that they won't go down as small as they need to, because that's kind of typical of these less expensive Chinese things, that they just aren't as precise, so they may not bother making those smaller sizes. Okay, so the next thing is figuring out how far up I need to go from the smallest staking tool in terms of why I decided to buy 4 punches of each size. So the Watch Repair Channel video, he shows that you need a couple of different ones to do the riveting of slightly different sizes. So that already told me I need 2, and then I need a little bit of a range above and below what I think I might need just in case. That's my feeling. Now this micrometer, right now it's set for 0 because it's closed, and the way it works is there's a scale on here which is at 0, and this actually measures hundredths of a millimeter, which is kind of insane. So if we turn this to 1, that's 10 100ths, or 1/10 of a millimeter, 0.1 millimeter, and you can see in the microscope what 0.1 millimeter looks like. So the tip of the pivot, to me, it looks like it's like insanely. Not that we need to know that actually for this. Maybe I would need to know it for Joule, but it's probably 0.05 or something, the tip of the pivot. Now I'm just going to open this up to 4.5, which is 0.45 millimeters. So this is kind of my upper range for what I think I need in terms of rivets, in terms of staking tool hole. And that's basically so that it can go over this stage. See, I might need one that goes over this next stage, but even that, I think it's fine from watching those videos. And if I need more, if they were in stock, if I needed more steaks, I just buy my way up until I get what I need. And I think that they'll also be, I'll be down in this range of small steaks, which is what I'll need anyway for other ETA and regular size wristwatch movements. So that's kind of that. And where else did I want to go with this video? 16 minutes. So there's something else. There are two faults in this. I had faults, meaning mistakes that I made. Again, I think this is kind of part of the reality of learning and doing watchmaking. So I want to talk about it briefly. So one is this. When I recased this watch, you probably know there's two screws that on a lot of watch movements, including this one, and they connect to these tabs, and they hold the case in the they hold the movement in the case. So I had this for whatever reason, this movement when I put it in here was missing one of those screws. So I replaced it with a different screw, which is too big. And because and I also replaced the tab. You can see it's kind of like brass looking tab, whereas the original one was steel. You can see one of the original ones there, and the screw is much smaller. So this big screw on top of the brass tab, which I took from an old Tissot watch or something and then filed it down to fit, that's too high now, and when the rotor comes around, it drags on the rotor. You should hear that. So that's the screw head causing some friction on the rotor. So to fix that, I have some smaller screws, and I'm gonna swap out that screw. But so that's one thing. And then the other thing is with the microscope, and this would have been very difficult to see without a microscope. I was inspecting this rubber gasket. So I put this rubber gasket on there, and I checked this for water tightness. And then from opening and reclosing this watch, I discovered that there's a tear. So this rubber gasket would probably work, but it's torn, so I'm going to replace the rubber gasket also. So that I also tried. The reason I'm mentioning that is that, like, with this tiny of a watch, which all of them are, this is particularly tiny, but the microscope is very helpful for me because I'm lazy and I don't want to put on a loop and do all this stuff with a loop. Sorry, I wouldn't call it lazy exactly, but microscope makes it a lot easier. But because I don't think everybody should have to buy a microscope, I also inspected this with a 5X loop from China. That was just a couple dollars, and you can also see it with a loop. If you don't wear glasses, these Chinese loops come with a little wire like this, so you can hold it directly on your eye. So you could find that fault without a microscope. I happened to find it because I was checking everything out in the microscope, and I discovered that tear. And And you don't want that because, oh, and I think the reason that happened is because it's a snapback, which I hate. And when you go in there with a knife and you snap it, you can can end up cutting the gasket that's in there. So I have another gasket ready to swap out there. Oh, and then that reminds me of another thing, which is that gasket. I bought a bunch of different gaskets, mostly on AliExpress. And you know, if you're going to do this with vintage watches, like those gaskets are so cheap, it's just, you should just go on there, find a bunch of different sellers selling different sizes, thickness, range of sizes, and buy a bunch of gaskets. So when you get in a situation like this, you want to waterproof something, you have some random watch you're working on, you need to have like a bunch of gaskets. If you end up waiting on things like that, you're going to get bogged down and never move forward. So the other thing is, this movement, actually, I noticed it actually does have one of those case back screws closer to the stem there. I think it's missing the other one, yeah. It doesn't have this one that's missing. But I can take that screw that I need for that from there. And then finally, there's one more thing that I noticed, which is, I'm not going to make you sit through watching me change that screw, but I did change it in rehearsing for this video, and I got rid of the scraping sound, but then I still heard that something was loose. The movement was, when I shake it around, it was just making a slight, I don't know if you can hear that, but I could hear something moving. So then I took a look at this point where this other tab, this is the original tab, so this tab goes, you know, it holds the movement against, it should be holding it against the back of the case and pressing down so that the dial stays in place. And what I saw is that when you press this down, now it doesn't want to do it. Well, what happened was I tightened the other screw. Oh, yeah, I know what it was. I put the smaller screw in there, and then I heard that noise. And now with the bigger screw in there, that noise has gone away. Maybe because I made it tighter or something. I'm not sure. But basically, when you recase a movement, you need to take the time to make sure that that those tabs are in the right position, and that the movement can't move around. And when I checked this before, I could press down on this, and I could see that gap opening up. So as I change that screw out again, I'm going to check that again. And then I can recase that with the gasket. It'll be watertight again, and it'll be in good shape, good to go. And then there's one more thing I want to do, which is I want to remove the personalization. These are basically somebody's initials that were engraved in the back of this case back on the original IWC case. So in anticipation of doing that, I used my micrometer just to measure the thickness of the case back. So it's 0.55 millimeters thick. So this is 0.5, it's actually 0.54 millimeters thick. And then I tried to estimate how deep the engraving is. it's kind of nice hand engrave. Unfortunately, it's someone random person's initials, and I don't like that. But as beautiful as it is, it's very shallow. So I'm certain that I can, if I keep this flat, I can sand that out and polish it again and get rid of the engraving. And then I'm also not going to make you sit through that. And then there's one other thing that has to be done with this. This dial was screwed up from when I bought it, because I bought the movement with the dial, but the whole thing had been really abused. There's a movement ring also that came with it that's got some serious abuse happened to that. So this second one, once I get it working, I just wanted to get it in a case with a dial and hands, and that's what I'm going to do. But the only thing is the case is slightly too small for the dial, just a hair. So I'm also going to have to sand down the edges of the dial to get it in there, and then I'm going to have to, once I can get it in properly, I'll have to figure out if I need a spacer to get the dial to sit the right distance from, so the stem goes through the I forget what the stem tube or the crown tube at the right position, and then also try to figure out how to deal with the missing tabs. So all that stuff gets complicated, particularly with this small of a watch, but it's kind of fun problem solving. And that's also one other thing about this whole thing about watchmaking, is that I think it's ultimately just like fixing a car or whatever. It's just a process of problem solving, and that's what makes it interesting. So on one level, it's all trivia because it's just a wristwatch. But the tiny aspect of it makes it particularly interesting and challenging. Okay, so that's it. The update on the Cal 44. Like I said, I'm not going to record doing all this stuff. No, actually, I'm going to record it, and then just turn off the video now, if you didn't do it already. There's another thing about my channel, which is part of what I'm doing right now is recording everything I do, because I'm not going to do this forever. And the interesting time to do it is when I don't know what I'm doing. For me, it helps me, it gives me notes, it helps me learn. It allows me to share that process of not being very good at what I'm doing with other people who also may not be very good at what they're doing. And that is a valuable thing. I'm convinced of it. And then eventually in 6 months or something, I'll be good at what I do. I'll edit my videos. I'll just say, take my word for it. This is how you do it. You don't need to watch every mistake I make. And I'll try to make videos that are very useful. Okay, so this is the screw that's too big. Now, my theory was somehow in this bag, I ended up with a tiny screw. I think the issue might be the hole size. The size of the hole in that tab that I made is actually too big for that tiny screw. So I'm going to try this. And this is actually the screw that I already did try. And it worked. So this is just out of my spare screws. Okay, so now I'm back to like, when I replace that screw, I get rid of the sound of the rotor brushing the screw, but then I get this little clicking. And I can feel the movement shift. So I don't know if you could hear the clicking, but that's where I realized that it was, the rotor was, or something was still loose. And now probably you can see anyway, what we're going to do is flip this over, flip the I want to prove that I'm not lying. Strange. Oh, I think I need to loosen this screw a bit. So that there's no upward pressure on this side. So what I want to do is put that back in, flipped over, and maybe it's not going to work. I kind of have to either work with the microscope or work with, can't have it both ways. So I'm going to loosen this one a bit more. I loosened it too much and the rotor can't cross it. See, that's not happy. I feel like that tab does need to be up like that, but what if I flip this around? See, this doesn't make sense to me because it's just like, no, nothing makes sense actually. If you've seen that video I did with the Eterna movement, which was more of like a 33, 34 millimeter watch, it's a lot easier when you have a larger case tab to work with. I don't really have a solution for this right now in terms of, I think I'll try. So this is a 0.5x lens I'm removing from the microscope, which makes it less magnification. I'm going to go back to more magnification and get this down into a position where I can see what I'm doing through the microscope. And that's my hope anyway. That is so cool. It probably doesn't look like I'm doing any better, but it's just so much, feels so much better now that thing's flipped over. I kind of love the idea of just always working like this. So see, I can fit that right under there, pull it back, put a screw in it. But there's a couple things. If it never wants to go flat, I don't want to break a screw. That does seem like it should work. Wow, that's a funky screw. Oh. Okay. Now there's some problem because the screw is kind of binding on the spring. That's kind of working. Okay, so that's caught under there nicely. Now, in theory, I just feel like the rotor is loose or something. It's not the movement after all. It's not scraping, but I'm just going to see if I can remove the rotor or just check the tightness of this screw. So one of the reasons I think there's an issue is that this movement doesn't seem to have that looseness. Very frustrating. I could swap out the rotor. Okay, actually, this is kind of cool just to watch this. So this is the Albert Peloton movement, these two claws, and then when you rotate the gear, the rotor, see how one pulls it and the other pushes it. If you go the other way, it also pushes and pulls it. Oh, that's interesting. I knew that was a spring. That's like a shock spring. That's why there's a cut there. So this thing is mounted on there. The flat side of that thing there. This is like quite a bit different. in terms of this gap is more narrow. Just trying to see if I can detect anything different. I love having two movements to work on. I guess I'm going to have to swap those out just to get deeper into understanding what's going on. What I'm doing is just trying to look at this rotor as I go around. What the hell? I cannot figure this out. Okay, I'm looking at this, the way that peloton movement is sandwiched. Wow, that's really low. Okay, one last little thing. Okay, that's pretty tight on that one. And that's the spare. This one, okay, this is insane. Oh my God. I have to cut that out. That was ridiculous. I'm done. Mission not accomplished. I need to put my tiny balance staff away. These are kind of spare screws. Yeah, I'm going to have to edit this video. People are going to get fed up because they're going to be like, well, why is he making these long videos? And then why doesn't he cut out all this bullshit? Because people think like, oh, I need to watch that. And then they're like, why did I watch that? Man, nothing is going right now. And this is the easy stuff. This is fucking putting a gasket on a fucking case back. That's ridiculous. Oh, I didn't have my glasses on. Jesus, freaking retard. Okay, another time for that. It's fucking rubbing on the case back now. So I should just swap those parts out. Oh, so such a drag. I know how to do that. This is not what I wanted to get into right now. So retarded. Hour and 7 minutes. Okay, so is it possible? So what I'm wondering is if the movement's not in the case. Yeah. So it's not sitting properly in the case Oh, that's not even... My preferred way to do this is not slipping. Just do and just like that. Okay, so then just so you can see, this is so annoying. Okay. Put this lens back on. Okay, so what I want to look at is this not... See how the dial looks like it's really touching the inner ring there? And there it looks like there's a gap. Is that just my imagination? So there's two things. It could be that it's not centered because I put so much pressure on the case clamp screws. Could be pushing it to one side or the other. But then also, which side looks like it's not seated properly? I have to stop this. I'm driving myself crazy. I wonder if it's actually like a height difference. You don't want that. That's why the fantasy that, you know, the fantasy that watchmaking, everything is perfect. That's why that is such a, people love that. People love that fantasy. Oh, it's just perfect. Just working perfectly. Well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. You don't know. You do not know the truth. Here's an interesting question. So there's a couple things. The movement could be not as deep in the dial as it needs to be. This guy has dial screws, right? So then that would, but that should, yeah, I think I did something wrong with those tabs. Reversing that tab was not a good thing. This is like when I give up. Stop worrying about everything. Delete the whole thing. Never admit how hard it is. Oh, that's funny. That's actually getting stuck on the screw head again. Okay, that's better, but I still feel like Hmm. $10:05. Save it for another day. Okay, one last thing. Hear that? You shouldn't. That is not the sound of winding, that is the sound of grinding. I think it's got to, I got to save that for another day though. Basically, I think the movement needs to come out and I need to see if the movement can press tighter against the dial, the back of the dial. There's some screws there, you know, like press it in, tighten it, because that's the only way to get the rotor away from the back of the case. And I'm pretty sure that that is what's happening. So this took an extra hour, but that's kind of normal. Like the thing is, I said like an hour ago, just skip this part. And the reason is obvious. Like you can mess around for an hour, accomplish nothing, maybe get a little bit more comfortable with what you're doing, but you know, it's a whole different world of wasting time, this watchmaking thing. Okay. Anyway, that's it for now. If you watched any part of this, I apologize deeply.